Political brinkmanship puts economic reform at risk in Italy. Eurozone policymakers fear the impact on the currency bloc's fragile recovery. Blackouts and power cuts. Companies in South Korea looking at a bleak winter as a date to restart the country's nuclear reactors remain unclear. Hello and a very warm welcome. You're with World Business Report. Also in the programme, we take a look at how political games in America are being viewed by investors in Asia. But first of all, the political stakes are high in Rome. Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta faces a confidence vote after Silvio Berlusconi pulled key ministers from the coalition government. However, what started as a challenge to Letta's authority is fast becoming a move that could jeopardise Berlusconi's future in Italian politics. Now, several of the senior figures in his centre-right party have announced they're committed to the current coalition. They're prepared to vote in favour of a Letta-led reform-focused government rather than risk political meltdown and new elections. So far, the instability has driven Italy's borrowing costs slightly higher and the euro has weakened. Let's get more on the financial implications from Christian Schultz of Berenberg Bank, senior economist there. Lovely to see you, Christian.
Good morning.
First of all, where do you think this confidence vote will go today? What's your prediction on that?
Really close call. Italian politics are very volatile. Letta, the Prime Minister, only needs about a dozen votes in the Senate to survive this vote. And there are, as we know now, quite a few defectors in Berlusconi's camp. There are also probably some defectors in Grillo's camp, in the comedian Grillo's protest party's camp. So there is a good chance that Letta will win this vote, and I would put a slightly more than 50% chance that he will.
The mood seems to be moving away from Berlusconi in a significant way this time. Do you think this could finally be the end of Silvio Berlusconi? Dare we say that?
Well, it's probably as good a chance as we've had. Berlusconi has lost key allies in the past, and these allies then were seen as maybe challenging his position in the centre-right, but ultimately they proved to be failures and are now insignificant. Now, this time it's his own party that's falling apart. It comes at a time where he is convicted as a tax fraudster, where he might actually go not to jail but to house arrest, and therefore be weakened anyway. So it is looking pretty grim for Berlusconi at the moment, but he is the Houdini of Italian politics. He might come back.
He is indeed. Now, Eurozone debt crisis, where does this latest debacle in Italy put that?
Well, if the third largest economy of the Eurozone is in political crisis, then that is bound to have an effect on confidence, potentially also on markets. If Italy really does go down the road of new elections, that markets could be affected. At the same time, if this turns out to be the end of Berlusconi, then it might have the opposite effect. It might strengthen once again that big bargain that we have in Europe of reforms in the crisis countries, help from the core countries, that has really reassured markets over this year and has led us back to growth in the Eurozone already.
Just give us your take on where things are at, because over the summer we had a real summer lull because, of course, Germany was gearing up for its elections. Now that's out the way. We know Angela Merkel is still at the helm, although we don't know who her coalition will be just yet. That's all being negotiated as we speak. Where are things? Because we've got some news out of Italy this week about youth unemployment, figures that are still very grim. What's your take on where the Eurozone economy is at the moment, and, of course, the future with Angela Merkel still seemingly at the helm?
Well, the Eurozone is back to growth. I think that's the key point. Since Easter, the economy is growing. That makes a lot of problems easier. All economies in the world have issues, structural, cyclical issues. The Americans do, the Asian economies do, the UK does, the Eurozone does too. And maybe these problems are bigger in the Eurozone than elsewhere, but they're manageable. With growth, they're definitely manageable. So from that perspective, the Eurozone looks a lot better than it did last year. But now, after the German elections, we have some key decisions to take. There might be a few bailout extensions, at least for Greece, Portugal, Ireland. There is the big complex topic of banking union to talk about and to make decisions on. But again, these are decisions that now look a lot easier to do and a lot less consequential if they get delayed than they would have last year.
All right, Christian. So we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. Thank you very much indeed for coming in this morning. And of course, any results we get out of Italy, that confidence vote. We will keep you up to date here on BBC World News. But now let's move on, because one of the world's biggest economies could be facing a winter of blackouts. We're talking about South Korea. It was forced to shut down most of its nuclear reactors last month following a safety scandal. The shutdown took a third of the country's power generation offline. Bad news for a country that already imports almost all of its fuel. Factories are also set to suffer. The country is home to some of the world's biggest technology and car producers, from Samsung to Hyundai. Lucy Williamson sent this report from Seoul.
This is how South Korea's energy future was meant to look. Its low-carbon green growth policy won financial subsidies at home and admiration abroad. But 5 years on, South Korea is facing an energy crisis. Renewables still account for less than 3% of supply, and cleaner nuclear power is no longer the silver bullet it once was. The Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan has made nuclear power less attractive here, and a series of scandals over faked safety certificates for Korean plants has raised concerns even higher. Plans to generate an extra 6 million kilowatts of nuclear power are currently on hold. And according to one key government advisor, South Korea's plan to get 2/3 of its electricity from nuclear power by 2030 is history.
We have two options, like coal or natural gas. So in short term, natural gas power generation is a good option, because we have many infrastructures for natural gas power generations or networking, and so some port to import. Okay, so that's a better option. But in the longer term, we have to think about how much the coal power generations will be coming.
The worry among environmentalists is that, faced with a national energy shortage, South Korea will turn increasingly to fossil fuels. This coal-fired power plant today supplies 20% of Seoul's electricity, and there are 2 more being built next door.
The current trend is that coal power plants are becoming bigger. Those being built now are comparable to the size of nuclear plants, exceeding 1,000 megawatts. And in terms of energy efficiency, there's an economy of scale. Bigger plants mean coal power becomes more economical.
The question of how the government plugs its energy gap is a sensitive one. South Korea has vowed to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. Cleaner types of coal are one option, but many believe they'll simply prove too expensive. And without a solution, South Korea could find itself caught between the green economy it wants to build and the energy-hungry one it's fueling now. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Seoul.
Now, as we go into the second day of the partial government shutdown in the United States, markets are staying resilient. Investors around the world seem confident, at least for now, that this game of political brinkmanship will be short-lived. But could this change as the October the 17th debt ceiling deadline looms? Let's get a sense of how investors in Asia are positioning themselves. Rico Hizon is at our Asia Business Hub in Singapore.
Sally.
Rico, I understand you've been talking to various investors and other players in Asia about this. What have they been saying?
That's right, and they are very calm about the situation. And as you can see right now, most of the regional markets are moving higher, Sally. Hong Kong, Australia, South Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, all in positive territory. It's only Japan that's bucking the upward trend after the government said it would go ahead with an April sales tax increase. And analysts believe the shutdown will be short-lived, but some are warning that if this drags on for more than a week, the U.S. economic recovery could be derailed and impact Asia's growth prospects this year.
Asia does rely West in many respects on the US. It relies on the US for demand for its exports. It relies on the US for foreign direct investment. And at the moment, you know, these developed countries are in a bit of a problem. So this is affecting Asian economies, and unless these Asian economies are themselves trying to wean themselves off this dependence, then they are going to experience a bit of a slowdown.
But Sally, in the short term, Asian market watchers are more interested in pockets of positive news nearer to home, particularly from Japan and China. Sally.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Rico, there in Singapore. And just to say, markets, as he mentioned, mixed in Asia. And just to mention the States, the Dow Jones and the other major markets, they're closing the day yesterday slightly higher if you missed the close. So, of course, brushing off the fear factor as far as this shutdown is concerned. I'll see you soon for a look through the papers.